Sheppard. Hey, I'm Mare, so I co-founded MetaNet Software with Reagan Burns way back in 2001. And if you've heard of us, you probably know us for N. It was our first real game, our first success, and by far the most popular thing that we've ever done. If you haven't, N is a really distilled platformer where the feel of playing it is the most important thing. We set it in a super minimal world to evoke a more well-defined environment without taking away from the gameplay, which is really the spotlight. We made it because there was this game that Reagan and I wanted to play that didn't exist, but we thought it would be fun and engaging, and mostly we just wanted to see if we could do it. So we tried, and it worked out. It was rough, but we liked it. So I want to talk today about what's been happening since then. Because even though we released N, we've never really felt like it was done. It's functional, but it's not beautiful or elegant. It's good, but it could be better, and some of the ideas could be taken further. And part of us never really felt we should move on to other games until we'd finished N. But there's tremendous pressure to always be learning and growing, and that typically means moving on to new projects. So every time we even thought about returning to N, it felt like a step backward, like we'd be repeating ourselves, and we resented that. So to try to move forward, we gave up on N. Over the years, we worked on a bunch of new games, but they never felt as good as N, so they didn't feel progressive. And instead of being encouraged by that learning process, we just felt crushed and lost confidence. Idea after idea had problems, and we finally started to believe that maybe N was the only thing we could ever do. When people asked, "What are you working on now?" in our heads, we heard them adding, "Since N," because that was like so long ago. We were caught in this horrible struggle of needing to finish N, but also needing to prove that we're more than just N. But every time someone asked how we were doing, we lied. Instead of saying, we're struggling, we said, we're fine. We were desperately afraid of not being good enough and afraid that people would say, your game was successful. Like, what do you mean you have problems? Everyone around us seemed to be brilliantly prolific, making new games effortlessly while we were just stagnating. We felt very alone. But as we talked with friends and saw some of the failure workshops here at GDC, we started to see that everyone is stressed and has problems, even if they're not talking about them. Because it's part of the creative process, the learning process. Everything about making games is hard, and not just the technical parts. So that gave us some perspective, and we finally started to realize that our struggles don't mean that we're stupid or broken, or that we're the only ones feeling this way. So fast forward to now, somehow people are still playing N, and they write to us daily to say that they want more of it. And somehow, even after being completely sick of N, we've realized that we still like playing it, we like making levels for it, and maybe we need to close out that chapter so we can move on. So this year we're putting it all on the table. We're making N++, the final iteration of N. Thank you. Thank you. But we are worried. We want to move forward. Is this a step back? We think maybe it's a crazy idea, but somehow, at this point in our lives, this feels like the right thing to do. That we can work on N again after all of that emotional trauma over the years is a huge deal. This feels like a turning point for us. And that we feel we can stop working on it after that is really important too, because we were clinging to the idea that N might be the only proof we had that we weren't completely, idiotic or utter failures, which is maybe silly, but that's how it went. So maybe we needed to try and fail 1,000,000 times over the years to get to this point, but we made it, and maybe that's really all that matters. We're still plagued by self-doubt every day, but we have hope now, and we haven't felt that way in a long time. Oh, and it doesn't matter at all whether the game is, popular or critically acclaimed or award-winning or not. We'll know that we tried our best to make it great so that we can close that chapter and move on to other games. That feeling of finally being done, of being free, that's what we really want. So I wanted to say this today because I know we're not the only ones struggling, and though we felt for years that this was our private hell, it doesn't have to be that way. The failure workshops are wonderful, but maybe we need to talk a little more about the psychological and the emotional side of making games as well. That's incredibly difficult to do because it means we have to accept ourselves even at our lowest and most vulnerable points and admit when we're struggling. That's scary, but it can also be liberating, and sometimes even just being honest with yourself is enough to help you see a way through. I think we all do what we do because we are compelled to create and because we can see this awesome potential of what our games could be if we can just find a way to make it happen. Making games couldn't be so rewarding if it also wasn't very difficult. But even though we sometimes feel we can't talk about the difficulty, we're not alone. I think it would help all of us understand each other better if we could talk about the psychological pitfalls of making games as easily and as publicly as we can about the technical ones, because then maybe even more of that awesome potential can be realized. Thank you.